Hi there, this is Carrie from Today's Leadership Solutions, and today I'm going to walk you through something I've been doing and helping organizations with for more than 20 years. It's called Organizational Behavior Management, or in a simpler way to put it, how to attain record-breaking revenue and profitability without adding staff or expensive software. This is exciting stuff, so let's go ahead and get started. So what I want to ask all you business owners out there, first and foremost, is does this resonate with you? Have you been caught off guard one too many times by your revenue or your profitability coming in far less than you planned or hoped for? Or how about this? Does it seem impossible to get good data about how your company is actually performing? Does this ever happen? You know you have a great team who wants to do well. You know that. But the numbers are coming up short and you are not exactly sure why, and you don't know what to do to help people get better. What about this? You know you're leaving money on the table due to inefficiencies, but you have way too many other fires to put out to even begin to address that. I know a lot of people have told me they feel this way. Or what about this? You keep losing your best and brightest employees, and you're not sure why. You want your people to love working at your company, and you want a high-performing culture, and it's been really frustrating how to have both. If that's you, I have really good news. The great news is that none of these things are your real problem, even if it seems like it. Your real problem is the lack of a system. You know, in companies, sometimes there is so much time and energy spent treating the symptoms, when the reality is a simple, common sense system can ensure the success of every type of business. So just bear with me for a minute and imagine another way, if you will. Imagine if your best employees and managers love their jobs and frequently bring up innovative ideas to make things better, unsolicited. Imagine if your managers functioned as stewards. Imagine if they managed the way you did when you were in the role. Imagine if your managers care for your employees, money, and materials as if it were their very own company. Imagine your revenue and profitability being the best or better than it's ever been. Imagine being confident that you know your business. You're confident because you know how your business is doing before end of month financials, and you're able to make good decisions in the moment, not in the rearview mirror. What if we told you we had a system that creates an environment where the struggles you're facing now are not even an issue? What if we told you we had a system that ensures that everyone on your team is effectively working towards the same goal? And what if we made it so that you had the financial and emotional peace of mind that you hoped for when you started your own business? There is the solution. I am so happy to tell you this. So I'm going to walk you through the solution and the system. Organizational behavior management is an applied science that can be utilized in any workplace to achieve revenue and productivity goals. The byproducts of a properly introduced OBM application are engaged employees, inspired and inspiring managers, and a culture of commitment. There are only 6 steps to this system, and when these steps are taken in order and performed correctly, OBM will consistently increase revenue and profitability anywhere from 10 to 25%. So let's have a quick look at the systems. First, there's targeting. There's identifying the outcomes, accomplishments, and behaviors that you want. Then there is task clarification, often known as training. Then there is tracking, or putting metrics in place. Providing objective, graphical, visual feedback to employees. Coaching and goal setting regarding the performance goals. And reinforcement recognition. This is the system that, when done properly with the proper behaviors, this will get you the results you want, both in terms of your financial numbers, your performance, and how your culture or how it feels to work for your company. It's sounds good, right? So let's talk about a couple premises of OBM. It's really important for people to understand this before embarking on it because it's critical. So the first premise of OBM is that employment is like a contract. Now, I'm not talking about an HR contract, nothing like that. The idea is that employment is a contract, that organizations don't hire people. We rent behaviors from people. Our employees are being paid to exhibit certain behaviors. The second premise is that an organization can be viewed as a pyramid. The behaviors of employees ultimately are the foundation of that pyramid. So any company, in any organization, in any type of industry, is made up of people doing things. You know, if we know what those things are and how to do them, and enough of those things are done at the right time in the right order, the organization hits its goals. People are doing things in your company all day long. You are paying those people to show up and do things. Whether or not they're doing the right things, that's going to determine your success. So the function of OBM is figuring out the right things and then making sure the right things are occurring more than they're not. So that's the definition of success. Success is the behaviors occurring the right frequency, the right time, in the right amount. The other premise of OBM is, and this is something we all sort of know, but it really gets hammered home. What's important to your manager is important to you. So managers are a key part of any OBM application. You know, we rely on the managers to be doing all the work in terms of, you know, putting the numbers on the charts, reviewing the charts with the employees, giving positive reinforcement, working on goals, coaching, goal setting. It has to come from the managers, and the managers have to be, you know, in turn held accountable for doing this, and they have to be recognized and measured and reinforced for doing this. This is so important. What can happen sometimes is, you know, managers will be given this as something else to do in an already full plate. And if managers can't do this, don't see the importance, or don't know how to do this, and it doesn't happen, your application won't be successful. So this has to be important to your managers. And of course, you get what you measure. I think this is another thing we all know. You get what you measure. So if we are measuring, we have to make sure we're measuring the right thing. We have to be sure we have identified the correct behaviors. So let's dive in a little bit deeper to that. The behavior management tool is a tool that we use with companies to really help them understand what we want to be measuring and what behaviors are important. So if you look at the top of the behavior management triangle is the outcomes. Typically, companies are already managing these outcomes. They're things like your revenue, your profitability. You know, companies may want to be a $50 million company or a $100 million company with a, 10% net income, maybe a 25% gross profit. Those are all the outcomes. And then next down is the department accomplishments. Again, most companies are tracking these pretty well. Usually we see these in a P&L. Every department has a breakdown every month of how much revenue they achieve and their profitability, how much their cost of labor, cost of sales is. Those are all important, and those are all probably already measured. And the next few usually aren't measured. So usually, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Within departments, there are often teams that contribute to the department accomplishments, not always. Sometimes we measure how the teams are doing, sometimes we don't. And then there's individual accomplishments. So we see this mostly in sales, is what is a salesperson's revenue and gross profit. We'll look at that sometimes. And then at the very bottom is the individual behaviors. So if you take a salesperson as an example, to achieve a certain revenue and profitability number, there are behaviors that go into that. There is call prep, there's research, there's prospecting, there's cold calling, there's reaching decision makers, there's setting appointments, there's going on demos, there is, all these things are behaviors that when the salesperson does enough of the right ones and enough, frequently enough, then they will get to their individual accomplishment. If all the salespeople do these behaviors and they all hit their accomplishments, the department hits the goal and the company hits the goal. So there's somewhat of an act of faith that these behaviors lead to the outcomes. There are a lot of behaviors people do. Some lead more directly to this than others, and some are easier to track than others. We'll get into more of that later, but the basics of the behavior management triangle and the foundation of OBM is that these behaviors is what makes or breaks the outcomes. Okay. The other thing it's important to understand when you're looking at organizational behavior management is what I call the balance of consequences. As we discussed, there's a lot of things people can be doing. There's productive behavior and unproductive. I don't like to say good and bad because that's a label. We try to avoid labels in OBM. But for a salesperson, productive behaviors are for prospecting, cold calling, recalling, looking up prices, doing competitive market research. All these things are things you probably want your salespeople doing. Unproductive behavior, very unproductive behavior is surfing the internet, unwork related things, chatting with coworkers. That's highly unproductive behavior. And there may be less productive behavior. Maybe a certain amount of chatting with the production team is necessary, but when it turns super social, it's not that productive. So every behavior has a consequence. It either has a natural consequence or an applied consequence. So for example, if I stick my hand on a stove, the consequence is that I get burned. That's an undesirable consequence to me. If I make a phone call, I may get a sale. That's a desired consequence. If I make a phone call, I may also get hung up on and rejected. That's an undesired consequence. For unproductive behavior, there is desired consequences and undesired consequences too. Unproductive behavior is socially very rewarding. You get to talk to your friends. You might, there are a lot of positive things can happen when you engage in unproductive behavior. There is sometimes undesired consequences to unproductive behavior. Maybe you don't hit your numbers, you get talked to by your manager, maybe you get fired. So you can see that there's a range of things, desired, undesired, in every single, for productive and unproductive behavior. So the real key for managers is stacking the deck. Managers need to make sure that the productive behaviors are getting the most positive consequences and the unproductive behaviors are getting the most negative consequences, undesired consequences. And really, that's a manager's sole job. A manager's main job is managing behaviors of the people, because as we said, organizations are made of behaviors, and a manager's job is to be a behavior manager. Make sure that the right things are happening and that the wrong things are cutting down. So whenever I go into a company, I like to sort of fill out a balance of consequences. And a lot of times people will ask, they'll say, how do you know which behaviors are the ones being reinforced? And I'd say, easy. The ones that you're seeing right now are the behaviors that are being reinforced. That's a given. The power of behavioral psychology says that behaviors that are positively reinforced are continued. Behaviors that meet negative consequences are stopped. That happens all the time. Now, what is considered positive, what is considered negative varies. There's a lot of things that make it vary. But if you're getting a positive consequence, you'll keep doing something. If you get a negative consequence, you will stop doing it. So whatever is happening in a company right now, it's getting somehow positively reinforced. Okay, that's really important to know. And that's a good takeaway for your company owners right now to understand that. I like to talk about purpose too, because the reality is, in the end, most of our company owners, most of us are not just in this for the money. People are wanting to be a $50 million company, $100 million company for a reason, and it's not just to be rich. You might have a real deep desire to employ people, to make people's lives better through a job. Maybe your product is something that makes the world better. Maybe you just love your community and you want to increase your community by being a successful business. I really encourage people, even though it's not strictly part of OBM, think of it in terms of the ultimate purpose and why, because that brings an even greater sense of purpose and excitement and engagement to your people, beyond just achieving the behaviors and getting reinforced personally. Feeling like you're part of something bigger, it really makes a big difference. So I like to stick purpose on top of here. You want this revenue, you want this profitability, why? And we just keep asking that question. Your why or your purpose is always greater than money or material things. So what is your company's why? What is your why? So understanding that, let's talk about OBM in a little bit more details. Okay. So our first step in OBM is targeting. This is the first step, and it's really the most important. During targeting, you're analyzing the entire workflow process to identify the critical behaviors required in each and every step. The purpose of targeting is to identify which behaviors or accomplishments will lead to the organizational goals and are not currently being performed at the desired level. Like, you're really looking for places where you can make an impact. Another purpose of targeting is to determine what makes the most sense to track behaviors or accomplishments. And there's a lot of science that goes into deciding what you're going to be tracking. So let's talk a little bit about that. We'll get to that next. So after you identify the critical behaviors or accomplishments, the next step is task clarification. So during task clarification, you're not only identifying what employees need to do, but also how to do it. You know, when you think about it, most companies do a reasonably good job of explaining what. It's usually on a job description, sometimes in a training document, but they often leave the behaviors required up to interpretation. So the step of task clarification is to get behavioral with employees and to make it really clear for them the connection between the behaviors and the outcomes. People need to see, you know, if you tell people get more sales or do more of anything and you just tell them about the results, oftentimes they'll just do more of what they're doing, whether or not it's productive. You will get more of behaviors, but not necessarily more of the right ones. So task clarification is a necessary step to increasing performance, although it's not sufficient. You can't get sustained performance improvement just with task clarification. So next we're going to talk about tracking. During the tracking step, that's when we begin to collect performance data on the behaviors and accomplishment we've identified. So ideally, during tracking, you want to start and get a baseline. It's difficult to get a baseline. I mean, just tracking alone increases performance. So whatever you're measuring, like we said, you get what you measure. As soon as you start measuring, you're going to see improvements, which is great for companies. I mean, it's not like they're going to be sad that you get improvement, but from the scientist side, it would be great if we could get a baseline because, you know, to truly do this, you're going to run it like an ABA. You're going to have your initial baseline, add the intervention, take the intervention away, because you're going to want to make sure, ideally, that your interventions are the ones causing the changes and not observer bias or, you know, just the fact they're being monitored. The rule of thumb for tracking is you want your means of obtaining the data as unobtrusive as possible, objective as possible, and impervious to misreporting. You don't just want to set up something that people, you know, or you don't want to improve people's reporting. You want to actually improve the performance. And how we say this as well is you want to take away any temptation anyone might have to misreport. You know, with OBM, we make this a very positive process. Everybody gets positive reinforcement. They don't get punished if they're performing badly. But misreporting or lying about their performance, that's a serious thing. And people need to understand that it's not going to be tolerated that they're falsifying their data. So you have to make sure the data is accurate, believable, and that people have confidence in the data. It's the only way it will work. Then, once you're getting that data, the first step is you're just getting it, but then you start doing things with it. So this is the first major intervention that gets you huge results. During this, performance scores are presented to employees by their managers on individual, neutral performance charts. So, and they're anonymous performance charts. So everybody gets a chart. Their name is not on their chart. The charts are posted publicly with a code, and people, you know, you can't stop employees from sharing their code, but you don't, as a manager, use the charts to humiliate, embarrass, or degrade anybody. So that is the first step, and that's where you start to see the first 10 or 15% improvement right there. So some rules of thumb is you do not want to give feedback any less frequently than weekly. The more frequent, the better. Daily is best. You also want it visually presented. Performance charts are the way to go. And when you have your performance charts, you always want your line going, a positive line going up to the right needs to represent good performance. So you don't want to track errors, for example. And you also don't want more than 2 data points per chart. This is tough. Companies start seeing this. They see how powerful it is. They see you get what you measure, and then they start getting worried that what about all the things we're not measuring? So we want to measure 100 things. And if you have more than 2 data points, ideally a score and a goal, it loses its impact. It's just too much to process. And feedback is neutral. Your reinforcement is another step. Feedback is basically just, hey, you scored 25 yesterday. And making sure they understand what their score is and how they got to their score. The next step, positive reinforcement, is really when we see OBM in its true glory, because this is when managers are trained to give positive social reinforcement. This is the key to effecting and long-lasting change. So this is the positive that happens after the behavior that keeps that behavior going. And again, I'll stress the law of behavior. Behaviors with a positive consequence are rewarded. Behaviors with a negative consequence are extinguished. Behavior with no consequence, extinguished slowly. So when you see somebody doing something right and you give them positive social reinforcement, that is very important. This is why training so often has a short-term impact and then trails off, because everybody's motivated, they do the right thing, but when there's not follow-up and consequences, people go back to whatever they're doing that they are getting reinforced. If a manager has too many priorities and managing their employees' behavior is not one of them, then they won't be managed. So the manager really becomes like a social vending machine to each employee. They consistently reinforce the right behaviors and only the right behaviors. So a vending machine doesn't give you anything unless you put money in it, right? A manager should not be giving social reinforcement unless it's for the right behaviors. You do not want to mess up your balance of consequences by chit-chatting and being all positive to a non-performing employee. That will not get the employee performing. That's positively reinforcing undesired behavior. Now you're starting to understand why that can be a problem. Manager also has to be versatile and choose the appropriate reinforcement for each employee. So it's not one size fits all. A great job, great job, great job is not going to do results. You have to get to know your employee and know how to reinforce them properly. And also, the soon as possible after the desired behavior is going to get you better results. And again, we get into all that in great detail into our training modules. This is just a very high-level overview. And of course, there are going to be times when your employees aren't getting it. So with OBM, there's coaching and goal setting. So when employees aren't hitting their numbers, they're not exhibiting the right behaviors or enough of the right behaviors, the management is called to diagnose and treat the performance problem. And I found in all my years, it's almost always the case when someone's not performing, management immediately wants to start training. And hopefully you have a sense now that training is probably not the answer to a performance problem. But managers are trained to diagnose, why isn't this behavior occurring? Is it they don't know what to do? Is it they don't know how to do it? Is it they're not getting feedback? They don't know their goals? So because OBM is a strictly non-punitive process, there is a required coaching process that allows managers to partner with the employee to identify the cause of performance lapse in a non-punitive way to increase performance. So the beauty of this approach and the coaching we teach is it takes the negative emotions, blame, and defensiveness out of the process and really allows the manager and employee to discuss an issue while preserving everybody's dignity and preserving respect. It works wonderfully, and it makes everybody's lives easier. The manager, the employee, and your HR person. So this is one of those benefits of OBM that will make everybody really happy that they're doing it. And of course there's maintenance. Because of the continued data collection analysis, you'll be able to tell when it's time to add or change interventions. You know, sometimes you'll get something going on autopilot, and if you've ever studied peak performance, you'll know that after something becomes a habit, you don't have to spend as much effort managing it. So, you know, you'll get to a point where something will become so automatic, you can back off the charts and just follow up once in a while and then focus on something else. That's really the best way to do this rather than trying to measure everything at once. You kind of start with the lowest hanging fruit or the thing that will have the biggest impact first, and then you branch off after that. So that's really the overall structure of OBM. I hope that gives you a good idea of the amazing benefits you can get from it. So let's address some frequently asked questions here. So typically, this is the first one I hear. I like the idea of OBM, but you can't measure the behaviors that lead to success in my company, can you? And I hear this every single time. everybody thinks that their company is unique and can't be measured. And I'll grant you, every company is unique and everything can be measured. When we get into it, if you decide to pursue this further, when we talk about tracking, there is a lot to go into considering whether you track behaviors or accomplishments, and the ease of tracking, it certainly plays into it. Never measure behaviors unless you absolutely have to, but sometimes you do. And you're always going to want to look at an ROI. If you need to pay 5 people to measure the behaviors to save $25,000, you're not going to do it. But if you've got millions on the line, it would make sense to do whatever it takes. You might want to pay someone $50,000 to measure that to get 5 million. So it really comes down to confident targeting and making sure you really understand how much money you're leaving on the table by not doing this, and the cost of measuring and the ease of measuring. We look at all that and we decide, does this make sense or not? And really, where can we gain the biggest bang for our buck in tracking? And do we have to go down to the behavior level? Can we stay accomplishment? You can measure anything. Will we? Not always, but you can. So I always say, yes, we can measure it. I'm not sure that we will. Next question. Are there any industries or employees that this doesn't work on? Yes. The only one we found. For sure, it's tough with partners in law firms and doctors. They are not super open to being measured. And this, you can do it, but they're tough ones to work on. And my professor always said, college professors, and to this day, he unfortunately passed away, so I never figured out if that was a joke or not, but I don't think it was. So people, he would call them the prima donnas in those there, and I mean no disrespect to doctors, it's just, it doesn't work so well if you're trying to measure them as it does with virtually everybody else. It does work on. How much does it cost? It depends. And that's something that we need to talk about, on a one-on-one or a breakthrough call. It depends on the size of the organization, what's required, whether you want a full implementation or whether you want your people in-house to be taught how to do this. There are ways to do this. So there's no work on your part. It's all on our part, or it's a partnership, or, we just teach your people to do it. So, the cost varies greatly. How do I know what to target? That's tough. You have to work with somebody who's an expert in this to get and make sure you're targeting the right thing, because whatever you measure, whatever you put through the OBM process will increase. You get what you measure. But if you're not measuring a behavior that leads to your organizational goal, then that's not good. You will get more of whatever you're measuring, but you want to make sure you're doing a proper workflow analysis, that you're measuring the thing that leads to your goal. How long does it take to see results? Not long at all. I mean, there's some prep time in the targeting and the task clarification. You will start seeing results right after task clarification. If you stop there, your results would attenuate. You will see results as soon as you start tracking, especially because people know they're being watched, and their results, bang, they increase immediately. And then they go back to normal after they get used to being watched and they see that nothing's happening. Once they start getting the feedback and reinforcement, that's when you see the results really take off, and that's where you see them maintaining. And that's the exciting part, and that's the true benefit. So what you need to know is this system is really easy to implement, but it does have to be systematically in totality to get the best results. A lot of people go through this presentation, they go back to their company, and they start giving people charts. And I don't recommend that, because it's not likely you're measuring the right thing and you're going to get the results you really want. If you're interested in implementing this system, the next step is a free consultation to determine if this is a good fit. So during this, we'll discuss who this is for and who it's really not for. We can identify the biggest constraint or pain point you're experiencing with your business. We can help you begin to articulate your organizational goals, accomplishments, individual behaviors. Go through that triangle with you. Can brainstorm tracking possibilities with you. Why call? Why schedule a call? Well, I am 100% confident that just this call alone will provide you with amazing clarity and insight, and put you on the path to creating the organization that you were truly meant to lead or manage, or it will just get you to where you need to be in terms of that clarity. OBM's been implemented in hundreds of organizations, and when it's implemented correctly, it never fails. So this will be worth your while. And, think about it. Wouldn't it be great to finally escape the ongoing rat race of recurring performance issues and achieve the lifestyle and vision you've had for your company since you started it, or help your company owner find that? This free consultation will transform your business, and ultimately it will transform your life. So, call today. Take control back of your business and your life. Achieve unprecedented results. Enjoy your work again. Imagine that. So here's how you can get a hold of me. You can email Carrie@todaysleadershipsolutions.com to schedule your call, or you can get right on my calendar right here. Here's the link, and I'll make that available underneath the video. So just jump on and schedule a call. They usually run about 45 minutes, and we can talk and see if OBM makes sense for your company or not. All right, I look forward to hearing from you, and enjoy the rest of whatever today brings. Bye-bye.